What's going on, creators? Yeah, just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about transmuting NPC energy and how you can start to do that in the here and now so that you aren't becoming triggered and reactive to the fucked up energy that people bring to you as you become more and more awake and aware of the dream-like nature of reality. You start to come across these people that just want to project their drama and bullshit onto you because they're fearful, because they believe in limitations, because you're almost like the polar opposite of the paradigm that they're used to. So it creates this weird dynamic. But, not to say that you need to become like match frequencies with the unconscious people or that you need to really change them. That was like a stumbling block for me for a long time of like constantly just like wanting people to be at the same level or to experience reality the same way I am experiencing reality. Instead, I've started to shift my understanding a little bit, and I find it to be helpful, especially in dealing with especially when people just bring this fucked up energy. So many times, the unconscious people do not realize that they're projecting their shit onto people like all the time, and then they point at the other person instead of themselves for why they're a victim or why they're cursed or whatever, not realizing that they're cursed because of what they're telling awareness and consciousness 24/7 in the present moment of their fears, their limiting beliefs, their assumptions, their us versus them mentality, this belief in two powers. Everything in their life is a gigantic correspondence to their mental activity, and because they don't want to take responsibility for themselves and the things that are happening to them, they're looking for someone to blame. It couldn't possibly be me, but even when people bring this fucked up energy to you, not to fall into the same trick or the same trap, take 100% ownership and responsibility for the fucked up energy people are bringing to you and become more detached from their offers of limiting beliefs, from almost like they want to extend hell and suffering onto you. Especially as you start to let go of the suffering in your own self, it almost like draws it to, like draws these fucking people to you. And I've experienced that so many times over I don't even know, it's like 10 years, 6 years, it started just like the music business, just when I started doing that professionally, I thought, they're like the people I thought were like my friends, they like all of a sudden they started like turning on me, and it's just like, I haven't done anything, I haven't changed, it's like, I'm just actually like pursuing these different things. And as more and more like quote unquote success started to be manifested and like, it started working, and I was able to like, achieve what I was like setting out to do, and like the people around me just got more and more hostile and like brought this fucked up energy, and that continued to progress almost to a point of like felt like being alone in a satanic Truman Show where people were just like constantly bringing this fucked up energy, parroting parroting these weird attacks that were ultra personal. And it's like, why are you acting this way? It's like, I haven't done shit to you. The only thing I've tried to do is like bring positive energy to you, and this is the thanks I get. It's almost like you just want to destroy me or just like take pleasure in my pain. It's like, someone really close to you is like having this fucked up thing and you're just going through a tragedy, and that's really entertaining. I'm feeding off of your drama. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But people are like that. And even as you like better yourself in your body, it's almost like the world will start mirroring these things back to you of like, oh, you want to be healthy and fit, you're a fucked up person for thinking that way. You should be like unhealthy, obese, and fucking ugly and all this shit. It's like, what? That's not who you are. That's not who God created you to be. God said you're a masterpiece, and so you should really be embodying that belief. It's like, do you believe that you're a masterpiece, or do you believe that you're some like monkey some monkey that came from like pond scum on some accident rock in the middle of nowhere, and just the satanic shit from the world, but like the more that you start to realize like the inner dynamic in your own self, how like the inner conversation that you're having, we're only ever really talking to God, in the sense that God is always observing our thoughts, is one with us, because God's not separate and outside. That's part of like the old cursed mindset, and a lot of like the NPCs are in that trick where they're worshiping the external, the shadow, not realizing that it's a shadow that leads them down this bottomless pit of like error and fear and suffering, but they keep looking at all this external evidence, and like the experts always outside of them and God's outside of them. Like there's always these people outside of them that just it's a really fucked up way of looking at things when you really stop and like detachedly, I don't know if that's a word, but like when you just are observing it without judgment, and you're just like watching what these people are doing, it's like, oh, you're constantly allowing the external world to program the subconscious, which then projects this little box of reality that you think is what it is. You think that this is your life because the TV told you, because the news programs you, because all of these things of the world that seem so real and so important to get to the bottom of, and all this shit. It has no, but it's all a circus. It's all a show. That's not really what's going on. There's like two worlds going on. There's the automaton world, where people are chasing their shadow, being constantly having their energy drained, constantly just suffering. And then there's like the kingdom of God world, where it's like you're not taking part in a lot of these kinds of things. And once you start to see the oneness and start to see how what you're impressing in the subconscious mind doesn't just fade away to nothing, but confronts you in the unfolding present moment, well, then it becomes ultra important to plant seeds into the subconscious mind, knowing that they will have an expectancy that they will manifest into a person, place, event, thing, an ideal situation. You don't need to worry about the how. God does that. Your job is to be still, hold on to the fact that God fights the battle for you, and you don't need to fear and worry and try to figure it out. It's already been figured out. It's a process of you realizing that you don't need to do the work, that God did the work. It's a gift. All you have to do is accept the gift in the present moment. But then when you get confronted with like this NPC energy, not to sit there and want to like match frequencies and attack them back, which is something I get into at times, because just my life experience has been, I've been to jail, I've been in fucked up situations, I've been around fucked up people, and so when it comes to like that kind of stuff, there's like a lot of like maybe like animal instinctual things, that I kind of get into, where it's just like, wanting to attack, not just taking bullshit or whatever, and it's an evolving thing. It's like everybody's got their own take on things, but when it comes to when people bring that NPC energy to you, instead of like matching that same energy, look at it as like, okay, well, I'm not going to allow their suffering suggestions to penetrate my subconscious mind, which is also their subconscious mind, because we're all connected. But what I can do is not become reactive, because as you like really become reactive and like, oh, I need to fix this problem, I need to attack this problem, this person's fucked up and I need to fix them, and blah 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 blah, well, then you just perpetuate it. But what you can start to do is let it go. Realize that they came to you maybe because they want to tear you down, or maybe because they got some suffering that they're just, and they got some programming that they need a different way of looking at it. Whatever it happens to be, you can look at it, people in one of two ways. Either they're a mirror for someone that needs love because they're suffering, or they're a mirror of love. And it's almost like there's some people that just consume energy, and some people that produce energy is another way to look at it, even though there's only really one source for the energy, which is within you. But it's also externalized outside of you as like a big mirror so you can see what's going on in consciousness. So when the NPC energy starts being drawn to you from others, it's like, part of my thing, it's like I only really want to speak to people that I'm connected with, that are looking to strengthen themselves and looking to create more and more heaven in the here and now for themselves and others. People on this, like, no, you need to spend the present moment in hell and suffering and spend it in fear and that kind of like limiting beliefs, and everything works in accordance to some materialistic bullshit. It's like, yeah, for you, that's how you experience life, because you believe these things. And then guess what? The mirror shows you it right back. It's non-selective. Subconscious mind is is non-selective in that way. And you can put that to the test by looking how much your old life was just cursed all the time. But when you're born again, which is a choice you make in the present moment to experience who you are in Christ, the new you, well, then, when people bring this fucked up energy to you, oh, Mike, you got a potty mouth and you say too many bad things and you're the bad man and I'm the good man because I'm morally superior with my talking. It's like, fuck you. It's like, I don't need this shit. Then don't listen. I don't need you to listen. I don't want you to be listening. And I'm offended. It's like, well, there's a million other people to listen to. Then find somebody that you can tolerate with your delicate sensibilities. Don't care, And it's like, oh no, Mike, you're supposed to be an example because you're a Christian person and they need to be perfect in every single way possible. And it's like, who said that? That's a Jewish belief. That's not the spirit. That's law keeping, which is something that we're not even supposed to be doing. But part of like the religious programming is like trying to be like the special boy that's like, oh, I'm perfect in every single way. It's like maybe God created me wonderfully irreverent. It's like, who are you to judge? When you're judging, you're not loving. So you're already bringing that fucked up energy to me when I don't even really desire it. But again, it's an example externally of a limiting belief and assumption that is being transmitted through the subconscious through a person that's quote unquote an NPC energy. This is a judgment I'm making or you're making. When people are bringing that undesirable energy to you, it's not judging to discern it. It's not judging, because when you really break down how the Bible uses the word judging, it's interchangeable with the word condemning, but it's another thing to go, oh, well, I don't know. It's such a subtle thing, and people can just bastardize it and everything. It's like we're called to love, and so ask, how does God look at this situation? Start to use infinite intelligence and the connection you have just to unpack the situation, because that's ultimately always the answer. You don't need to listen to people outside of you because the teacher is within you, and so the more that you're able to learn through intuition and discernment what is true and what is not, the more that you can go, oh, well, this is clearly a limiting belief that this person is bringing to me. That's who they are. They're projecting that shit onto me. And instead of maybe cursing yourself by attacking them and then losing your peace, maybe it's a time to use the connection you have with infinite intelligence and the subconscious to forgive them, because what will happen is they'll trigger the programming within you. It's like, well, who the fuck are you? And then next thing you know, all this unconscious shit going on that's already inherent within your own consciousness, which is not loving, which is limiting you to experiencing more and more of these kind of fucked up, undesirable situations anyway. They're actually kind of helping you. But, if you become super reactive, well, then it's like, well, now I'm screaming into the field of awareness, and I do not want to continue to perpetuate this. And so what to do? Well, you can continue to curse yourself by the thoughts that you're holding of attack, or you can start to hand those over to infinite intelligence to give you a new understanding about the situation, that person. If they're connected in consciousness, and this is the script I'm running about this quote-unquote other, well, I can start to transmute that by extending just a simple suggestion through the subconscious of like, God loves that person. I don't need to continue to tell myself a negative story about how they're such a fucking idiot, or, how dare they just like bring their bullshit to me in my world, whatever. And it's like, Mike, you're being a hypocrite. And it's like, well, you know what? Join the club. Like I'm a person out here, processing this thing as just like you. Stop putting me on a pedestal like I'm some superior person. If anything, you should have seen where I was 5 years ago. It's like totally night and day different. And that's kind of like the point of these. It's like, well, Mike, look at your demonstrations. You're not the perfect person out here. You're not Andrew Tate, where you're, oh, look at my mansions and all this. Like, okay, well, not to talk shit about Andrew Tate either. It's like, if he can do it, anybody can do it, because there's only one power that manifests all these different things through consciousness. So it's like, I'm actually really excited when I see people that have awesome demonstrations, because if they can do it, you can too. it's that NPC energy that wants to tear people down and be like, well, no, he's the bad man and he's doing this and this, and so he's a sinful person. And it's like, well, when you're doing that, when that energy is what you're festering in, and then you're bringing that to other people, it's like you are putting a big sign on your face that you are, for one, jealous. You are embodying these things. So where like I am trying to embody what I'm trying to do, you unconsciously are embodying jealousy. Oh, I am jealous of this person. I am envious of that person. And that's what that NPC energy is like for me when I'm experiencing these things from other people. It's like they put a big sign on their face of what they're accusing me of, or that they're accusing other people. They're like, oh, he's such a fucking narcissistic liar. It's like, well, then I automatically assume that's who you are, and I'm going to treat you accordingly. And you'll start to experience more and more of these situations and these weird, super weird, like some of the conversations I've had with total strangers are so surreal, the stuff people will tell me. And it's like, I don't ask for it. I don't even really seek it. It just comes to me. Like, the people just want to bring their fucking dramas, and they, it's like I'll just be like maybe doing yard work and someone will stop at the house. The next thing you know, they'll just like start venting all of this shit onto me. Like, why do you think I'm your therapist? Why do you think I want to hear your fucking excuses why you can't do something? Meanwhile, they're complaining, they're bitching, they're whatever. They're making up all this stuff, and it's like, okay, well, that's what's been going on in your consciousness, and no wonder it's manifested for you like that. No wonder it's happening like that, because that's what you expect and what you believe, and you're blaming all these people like you're a victim when you're not a victim. You are a powerful creator that's connected with with God, that ultimately does the creating. You're not separate from it, and I had such a hard time with that for years, because I'd get so triggered by it, because it's like, why are you telling me this, for one? Why are you coming to me with this fucked up energy? And it's like, why are you putting me on this pedestal that like now all of a sudden we're not the same? It's like, we're exactly the same, only I just been through that. I didn't let that fear put me in a little box. I faced that fear, and it's like, I encourage you to face that fear, because until you do, you're going to be stuck at it and stagnant. But, part of that fucked up energy, what you can start to apply is that there's a story running in your own consciousness in the face of that other person. So for example, if like somebody like comes to, just take this channel, for example, I don't expect people to agree with me 100%. I expect on some level, the people that hear this, some will believe it and apply it and do it, and hopefully they're blessed more and more so from just taking what I'm saying on faith and applying it. Some people will like disbelieve this, and they'll double down and they'll believe whatever they're believing, their fears, their limiting beliefs, their suffering, whatever. That's fine. That's the nature of things in creation. But what is fucked up is the story that you'll tell yourself in the face of like dealing with these different people. So when they come to you and they're like just being a hater, it's like, well, if you believe what they're saying, a lot of times that those people unconsciously were drawn to you anyway, because that belief is in your consciousness without them having to say it. If you're like expecting like people to be like super like hateful and mean to you, it's like, oh, I just did this stream and like I said something maybe controversial and people are going to attack me and be mad at me and this and that, and have an expectancy of that, maybe a fear that people will like say these fucked up things to you. Well, don't be surprised then if that gets transmitted through the field of awareness, embodies as a person, and they do that. And it's like, okay, well, things are working a lot more spiritually than first assumed. When you realize that, then it's like, okay, it's a lot easier not to become reactive when you put into practice in your own spiritual day. What am I thinking? What am I impressing into awareness at this specific moment? Am I thinking about blessings? Am I thinking about love and joy and extending like more and more states of heaven? Experiencing that, what would that feel like? What would that be like? What would I do in the face of a situation like this in heaven? Like my grandpa, he just passed to the next realm, this next reality or whatever. a couple days ago. I've experienced a lot of death in the past like year or two. You have people that are like close to me, and it's like you can have these stories that you're like separate from those other people or whatever, and believe those limiting assumptions, or you can start to renew your mind, ask God how to think about it. But like the thing to keep in mind is, what does heaven look like in the face of maybe that person transitioning onto a new form? If everything is like a dream or whatever, well, when people transition, not only is there like a weird thing going on with them, there's also, again, a corresponding little story going on in your head about the situation. In the face of this situation, am I holding on to the spiritual truths of God? The stuff that Jesus told us, is real, demonstrated as real, or am I believing my old cursed mindset, my cursed identity? Oh, they're separate. Death is real. Nothing but chaos. There's nothing but disorder. God is nowhere to be found. Who knows? It's all just random nonsense. Well, these are all things that you are impressing in the face of an external situation. Again, you can start telling yourself anything that you want, but more. But really, is it beneficial? Is it letting go of suffering, or is it creating more of it? And dealing with like people with this NPC energy, you can really start to apply your own imaginal acts, your own mental story of that person in the present moment. Oh, they're just, and maybe it's your spouse, for example. It's like, oh, they just, and you just go down this tirade in your mind about how they're not living up to your expectation, or they're doing something that's really frustrating and annoying. They aren't listening to your wants and needs. They keep line stepping or shit testing or whatever it happens to be. Well, you're not living in the end. You're not embodying the state of the wish fulfilled according to like the Bible. Ask, believe, receive. So you need to be believing in the present moment. And I believe a lot of that belief is an expectancy that infinite intelligence will heal that person's mind, because we aren't separate from infinite intelligence. That's part of God's desire, is that they heal and become more and more whole and complete. Those are things that you can put into your subconscious, which then translates to the other person if they choose to accept it. If they don't choose to accept it, that's not your business. You did what you could do. They either believe or they don't. And if they don't, they have to deal with the consequences. But ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody will someday believe it. It's not in your timing or worry or concern when that needs to happen. But getting out of like judgment is a big thing. But then also realizing that when people are projecting their shit onto you, it's not that they necessarily need you to conform to their programming, but it's an opportunity to then go within yourself to see what you're programming into the field of awareness that's listening to your thoughts, conscious and unconscious thoughts, impressing, projecting, and then you're also experiencing that. So if you have like these negative stories about NPCs, even, it's like you can look at like 30% of society as just being completely unconscious, and then you have another third that are just like such sheep that they'll just go with whoever they think is in charge. So you have like the majority of people under the sway of the automaton of being programmed, probably more now, but not to say that that's continuing. It seems like people are more and more coming into harmony with this spiritual truth, and really resonating with it as they see how fucked up and retarded the world was, and how inverted and backwards it is, how draining and ultimately kind of like a satanic Truman Show. Not to say that you go to a city, there's like two worlds, many worlds actually, infinite amount of worlds going on, but people project their own world onto a blank canvas with their perception and their stories and everything else, and you can have people in like one room, both one in the state of hell and one in the state of heaven. They're still in the same room. It all just depends, and like a lot of times those unconscious people will be brought to you because they can see something in you that's super triggering, but they wouldn't even be able to be brought to you unless there's some benefit for the entirety of creation. there's something going on that's ultra important in this interaction, even if it doesn't feel like that, because we don't know how our words impact other people, how our thinking impacts. That's part of the subconscious, part of infinite intelligence orchestrating this whole thing. But if it's being brought to you, instead of judging it like this is not how the day should unfold, should be trying to let go of how the day unfolds and just trusting the infinite intelligence is bringing every breath to you in a perfect way. And as you're impressing your subconscious with those kinds of beliefs, like, oh, everything that's unfolding is a higher level of blessing, is a higher level of harmony, is a higher level of heaven, is a whatever. As you're impressing that into the subconscious, into your subconscious, and believing that and expecting the day to unfold more and more harmonious, because only love is real. So anything that's like fear related or whatever, it's a kind of red flag that you're believing things that can be evolved. And when NPC people maybe make you aware of something, and the next thing you know, you're triggered in your head and you're just like, well, fuck them. Who are they? You know what? They ain't perfect. They ain't loving. They ain't doing this. They ain't whatever. Listen, try to create some space by breathing, observing the thoughts, become one with the field that is the observer of thoughts. You're not the thoughts, and as the more that you disidentify your sense of identity with thinking, and more so of just like, oh, I can choose to get back to like, Jason Christopher used to say, getting back to base camp. I always thought base camp was a good metaphor, but there's lots of similar metaphors where you just like bring yourself back to the present moment, back to the field where you're observing the thoughts, and instead of just letting these unconscious beliefs and assumptions just plant into that fertile soil, which will have a correspondence that you will experience. Well, start to become one with the field, and then start to choose differently. It's like, oh, I'm just thinking attack thoughts, attacking that NPC person, hoping that they just disappear out of my reality, or that they die, or whatever. It's all stuff that you can think. A lot of times, the NPC people are projecting that thought onto you, where you think that it's you who wants to attack and kill the other person. A lot of times it's them that wants to attack and kill you for like shattering their fragile paradigm. It's founded on nothing. If your paradigm is founded on truth, people's offers and shit doesn't affect you. But if you're on such a flimsy paradigm, it's like you're really wanting to hold on to Santa Claus, and it's like anything that tells me different than that, I'm just gonna freak out and become hysterical. But that's like how the world operates in a lot of different ways at the moment. Not to say it always will, but maybe it will for some people. I feel like how you align your consciousness will bring you into another level of awareness here in the present, in this reality. But that's just the direction I'm heading. But like using awareness to become still, listening to the thoughts that you're thinking about the other person. Maybe I don't know, maybe it's unveiling a deep-seated fear that maybe you're that you are what they are accusing you of. Like, oh, I am guilty of that. I should feel shame for that. That's the opportunity then to hand that over to infinite intelligence and like, no, what is true about that? Is there anything true about that? Is there anything I can do? Because I'm actually now triggered by this NPC person that said something that they shouldn't even been able to know. It's like maybe it was something that you were like a deep-seated insecurity or something, or a thought about yourself that's like you haven't told anybody, and like the NPC person like sensed it for some reason, or like brought it to you, and it's like, hey, you're really bringing a lot of like dorky energy. It's like, what? Who the dorky? It's like, and then next thing then you start to spiral, wanting to attack them for saying that. A lot of times, when you're not super attached to things, you can almost look at those kinds of hate comments And I was like, that's the best that person can do at love. It's like one way to maybe not become so triggered by that kind of energy from others is like, okay, they feel threatened for whatever reason. I don't know why they feel threatened. I have no intention of hurting them or harming them in any type of way, yet they feel extremely fearful and threatened by what I'm saying, or just my energy is like putting them in a weird thing. It's almost like you can walk around a store and people and you could just be going from point A to point B, and people will just either stare at you or mean. Like I get this from like guys where they just stare at you like mean mugging or whatever, or it's like they want to take you down a peg or make some offhanded thing to kind of like shit test or what, because like, yeah, women shit test, but men shit test too, especially if they think that you're a threat for some reason, and it's like, okay, well, whatever. Or the antithesis of like, well, that guy must have just been born under a lucky star, so that that's why he's able to do these things, and I gotta, whatever the excuse, whatever it is. But if there's actually something going on in your own consciousness where the point you're triggered by it because you actually believe that you're guilty of something or whatever, well, don't be surprised then if people start to mirror that shit back to you, because there's so much dream-like stuff that goes on as you start to raise your level of consciousness to align with your creator and walk in that kind of divine harmony. You start to see how everything is connected, and you start to see how our inner state becomes like externalized in a sense that we can start to kind of manipulate the mirror by manipulating our concept of self. And as you do that, the NPC energy that people can bring to you, I don't know, say it doesn't, become frustrating. I feel like it's frustrating because it's like, I'm not trying to have an argument with you or disagreement or any of these types of things. It's like, if you want to suffer, then suffer. Don't try to put it on me like, oh, I need to spend 80 years suffering before I can be in heaven. And then our creator that created heaven and earth, but for some reason only heaven in this external place is where you actually feel some sort of harmony when God is in the eternal now. And if you actually listen to what Jesus was saying about our relationship with God, but again, these are all other people's sayings. But when they bring that shit to you, you can look at it like, hey, they're projecting their shit onto me. When they accuse me of something, that's what they're doing. At that moment, you can start to change how you're thinking. It's like, oh, they're just a lying narcissist because that's what they accuse me of. I know I'm not that. And if I was, it's like, why would I? It's like, okay, it's like, let me look at that. Let me see what you're saying. You're claiming I'm a lying narcissist. It's like, okay. I feel like that's what you're doing, because it's like, for one, not everything is about you, but whatever, it's like you can then extend, okay, well, how does God look at that person, and then start to tell yourself whatever the mental programming is that's negative about the other person, like they accuse you of that. It's like, okay, well, that's what they are. That's not who I am in Christ. Well, how would God even look at that other person? Well, you can start to look at them as being someone who's into the truth, somebody that that isn't unconscious. Imagine that for them, and then drop it, let it go. It's like you either they believe it in their own self or they don't. That's as far as you need to go with it. You don't have to sit there and make them your project that you're going to fix them. If they choose to stay in a state of suffering, that's on them. But the best you can do is extend heaven in your mind to them. Forgiveness, I believe, is just changing the mental story that you're telling about that other person. Instead of looking at them as just being a retard or whatever, it's like, okay, well, maybe there's more to them than that. Obviously there are. God created that person, God loves that person, and just a simple thing like that can start changing that mental script from, oh, they're a retarded NPC, to, okay, well, actually they're part of creation, they're part of God's mind on some level. Maybe at a very asleep level, but that doesn't change the fact that God created them, God loves them, even though you may not at the moment. But by extending love to them, it changes the dynamic that you're feeling internally, and you start to then see that reflecting out more and more. So if as you extend God's love to the other person, the more you see that as what you are experiencing, which then that strengthens that in yourself, too, and it becomes more obvious, like, okay, well, I can either attack that person and my vibe gets lowered, or I can just realize the truth that God loves that person. And as you realize that, as you impress that into your subconscious, well, you'll see that, what you give to another, it comes back to you. Always keep that in mind. It's like if you attack another in your mind, attack will come back to you. If you extend love and if you can't do that, God can do that. God loves that person. Oh, okay. And as you do that, maybe God will mirror back to you something about them that God really loves about them. It's all about changing the inner world that you're living in, to align into more and more harmony. When you're in conflict, you're not in harmony. And a lot of times, you can have a 5-second interaction. Maybe somebody just leaves a 2-sentence comment that's really fucking stupid or just really hurtful or mean, or they might not even think of it as being mean. There's been many times I've been accused of saying stuff that is just like not nice or whatever, but it's like, to me, it's like a completely neutral statement. It's like, oh, the sky is blue. And it's like, well, how dare you say that, Mike? How fucking dare you? You don't know what my life experience is. I see it as purple. I'm colorblind. How dare you try to assume I see the same? And it's like, nothing I said was emotionally charged. I'm trying to just make an objective statement of like, okay, well, that person's hair is 3 inches long. Well, how dare you? It's centimeters, Mike. Don't you, imperial fucker, whatever, and it's just like, some people just want to be disagreeable, and it's like, okay, well, whatever, be disagreeable, but what you can do, not even really change them, but change how you're thinking about them is what I'm trying to say, because like the more enlightened you become to like the spiritual fact of reality, the more that you experience these kinds of fucked up things and fucked up energies from people. And unless you become more able to be in harmony with it without becoming triggered yourself, well, guess what? Everything is already a reflection of what you can handle in consciousness. So today is where you start. Now is where you start. If there's things being brought to you, if there's people being brought to you that are fucked up or whatever, it already is in your consciousness. It's like, you don't have to go very far. Just like think of that one person that's super irritating or frustrating or difficult, or just general public. If you're doing this, like these kinds of things where it's like you're open to any kind of criticism from anybody in creation, well, okay, that's one thing. Well, what about my family? What about my spouse? What about my friends? What about this? It's like, is there anybody that I have this really negative story about, which then is showing up in my space as that fucking thing, embodied as a form? Everything is mental, guys, and girls and beings, whoever's listening, it's like everything is consciousness. So it's like all these little stories of separation of like, well, there's this kind of people, there's that kind of people. Well, is there? I mean, or is that just something that you're believing in, which is being externalized and showed you your faith? Like, oh, yep, this is true. I'm right. This is true. I'm right. Is there a different way to look at it? Probably. So you can start to transmute a lot of those kinds of NPC-esque kinds of behaviors. Not to say that there isn't like just definitely just automaton people out there that are just so brainwashed that it's like hard to communicate, because it's like, unless you're in that kind of matrix, you're the fucking weirdo. You're the weirdo. It's like, what do you mean? He's like, Don Lemon said this. It's like, you're a fucking idiot if you don't believe Don Lemon. It's like those kinds of people, and it is both sides of the aisle. Not to say like, oh, liberal people do it and conservatives, both are doing it. A lot of people are doing it with other things besides just politics. It's like so many people are being programmed by their parents, by the society, by quote unquote experts that they put on a pedestal. All of these things, it's like we get enslaved by creating these false idols, which is, I feel like a big part of like your spiritual walk with God is to, for one, not just to say, oh, God said this in the Bible, I'm really triggered by it, but how is that a benefit not to like steal from another? That doesn't make sense. If I don't have it, am I supposed to starve? Well, when you realize what you do to another, you do to yourself. When you have thoughts of stealing or thoughts of scarcity, you can start seeing why that's not ideal, because then that gets projected onto the screen of space and you experience that. And then not only that, but then people will start stealing from you. And so you're just like, oh, a lot of the guidance makes more sense when you realize this oneness, when you realize everything's connected. It makes a whole lot more sense, and it makes it a whole lot easier to be like, oh, wait, this isn't about good and evil as much as a perception about reality and a fundamental assumption. Once that fundamental assumption is like brought to light, then it's like, oh, that shit makes a lot more sense. And it's not really a struggle and difficult when you realize that. And it takes doing, it takes to practice to really bring that to awareness. Not bring it to like, I get it. That clicked. But with that being said, I just wanted to bring that to you guys. I know a lot of people deal with like that fucked up NPC energy, and I don't know what to do with it. Something I didn't know what to do with for years. It took years to get to like a point where it's like I wasn't being triggered and reactive to it. But part of the game is realizing that if people are deeply unconscious, they want to be punished. They want the suffering. It's not even them that wants it, but it's like that spirit loves it. It loves to be punished and fucking attacked, and it's like it tricks you into fulfilling that because it gets your energy. And the more reactive to it, and more that you believe it's a real threat and a real problem and a real thing, the more that materializes into form, and the more you got to battle and resist it, and the more of a mountain you make it. And it's like, don't resist it, in the sense that you can choose to look at it differently and experience it differently. And as you do it, as you put it on in your own consciousness, in God's timing, which as you let go of your beliefs in linear time happens faster and faster and faster, and you experience it, and you experience the change, and you experience it's like, oh, this is actually working. This is how it is, But there's a level of faith building that happens as you face fears, face these uncomfortable things, face these things that you don't even really want to deal with. It's like we all have those things. It's like when I used to smoke cigarettes, it's like, most of the time, I was smoking, I didn't want to really quit. I didn't really give a shit about it. But then all of a sudden there was a change in me where it's like I started realizing every time I'm smoking the cigarette, there's a really negative story that's going along with it. Of like, oh, this is going to give me cancer. This is killing me. This is hurting me. This is bad for me. And it was just, you just notice those thoughts. It's like, okay, well, I shouldn't be doing that then if I'm pressing these beliefs into my subconscious, because then it will manifest. If I believe it's bad for me and I expect bad things to happen, it's only a matter of time. It's unfolding now, but it'll have a negative consequence because I expect that negative consequence. So it's like I knew at a certain point that I just need to stop doing that. And when are you going to stop? Stop now. It's not going to be tomorrow, because then you never will. It's like you're already doing it now, unconsciously or not. So the more that you're consciously doing things in the present moment, like, I know I really need to do that. Well, if you know you really need to do it, then do it. It's like I get that way sometimes with physical therapy, where it's like I know I need to do 30 squats, for example. I don't want to do it. It's like I just dread the idea of even doing it, even though I know if I do it, I'll feel fantastic and I'll improve. So it's like, take those things that are confronting you in the present moment and fucking tackle it. Stop letting the fear keep you from it, because the fear is what's locking you in this state of consciousness, which sucks, which is not actually who you are. So you got to face the fear, realize that fear is an illusion, that there is only God, and that there's nothing to be afraid of. Part of the problem is the fear itself and the limiting belief that's at the root of it. That's all we're ever letting go, is fear, to embody more and more states of who we actually are now, which, I'm starting to ramble, so I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, all social networking things. Appreciate your spiritual support and your physical support, donation link in the description. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I always want to respond to everybody that donates, but, I also don't know really how to do. I appreciate those little messages that you guys send in the donation thing. I read them. I really connect with a lot of that energy. I want to hopefully, give that back to you in a way, hopefully just by making you aware I am really thankful when I get those messages, when I get that little support, maybe be better at like showing gratitude for that. But I do appreciate it. I really enjoy the like little messages. For those that never have donated, like through PayPal or whatever, you can like, I think even a penny you can give somebody. But like there's just like a spot to put a little message. And a lot of those messages are really heartfelt, and I appreciate them. I do connect with those energies, and I hope to multiply that back to you in some form. But yeah, thank you again for that. Appreciate your spiritual support, and I already said that, but I appreciate your attention, and hopefully I was a good steward of that. Until the next now, God bless.